According to the State Court Administrative Office, since 2010, embezzlers across Michigan have been ordered to pay victims $203 million, the bulk of which, about 86%, remains unpaid. Today we're going to talk about the problem of embezzlement. I'm Lisa Smith, and this is Focus on Business. Rob, we've had several people from the Small Business Association of Michigan on the show, but could you just give us an overview about the organization?
Yeah, the Small Business Association of Michigan, or SBAM as we are known, is an organization based here in Lansing. I often remind our members that we have 25 employees here, and our employees get up every morning, they come to work, and their job is to make Michigan a better place to own and operate and grow a small business. That's what we do. So our mission really is to advocate for small business, to provide products and services. Generally speaking, we take the buying power of our members, we get them a deal they can't get by themselves, and then we help people grow their businesses right here in Michigan.
Today's subject matter is about what a little bit darker of a side. We're talking about embezzlement.
Yeah.
What kinds of things do you do for owners who are maybe thinking about tough stuff?
There will be some resources today in the show. I think one of the things we know is sometimes people don't want to talk about the things that go bad in their businesses. And in fact, one of the things that we often do in our leadership council, which is all business owners, we have a session we call Business Bombs. And that is really an opportunity for successful businesses to tell some of the stories that didn't go so well and the lessons learned from those. And it's not uncommon to hear someone talk about the person they trusted the most who actually ended up stealing from them. So I wouldn't say embezzlement is common, but it's certainly something that lots of business owners have experienced, and hopefully we'll get some insight into how to think about it.
Well, I think what is common is that business owners struggle with all kinds of different issues, and I think today's show is going to be helpful to owners who can then know they're not alone out there.
Super.
Embezzlement is a very common crime. People think that it's a victimless crime. Some fancy corporation can just take it out of petty cash. Yet, as we know, the majority of businesses are small with less than 500 employees. So let's start with defining this crime and then talk about who the real victims are. On our panel today, we have Denise Pollicella, founder and managing partner of Pollicella Tompkins, Sarah Jennings, CPA and principal at Costerisan, and Adam Gilroy, owner, Capital Insurance Services. Thanks so much for coming today. So let us start there. What is embezzlement? Let's define it.
So embezzlement is the theft of any property that's been entrusted to somebody else by you. Okay. So generally people think of cash. That's the easiest thing, and that's probably the most difficult part about being a business owner, and you've been growing and now you're entrusting somebody else to take care of your money. That can be as simple as a person who runs a cash-intensive business having a clerk or someone else just take a bunch of cash at one time. It can be also an instance where you have maybe a person who works for you who is an accountant who takes care of some of your money for you, sort of skimming or paying themselves a little bit at a time or fudging the books a little bit so that they are getting paid a little bit more. And then also there are instances, and I think that this is very common, where people say that they're just borrowing the money because of course you're a big company and they're just an employee and they may run into a circumstance where they need the money. So they're going to borrow that money and then they were intending to pay it back later. That's still theft, it's still stealing, and that's embezzlement.
Yes, and it's a difficult one. So let's say you suspect that there's been some embezzlement. You've got a pretty good idea that that's happened. Sarah, what are the top 3 things that you should do if you suspect that something's going on?
Well, one thing we always recommend, don't be embarrassed about it. So often we see people just try to take care of it themselves. And realistically, if you're a business owner or if you're a C-suite or an executive that suspects something or finds one thing, that's just the tip of the iceberg, and there's probably a whole lot more. So you don't want to just do that. So, don't hide from it, and call a trusted advisor, whether that's your attorney, your accountant, somebody for help. And then also check your insurance policies. I would definitely say make sure that you're checking all of those things, because if you don't do that, you're going to lose out long term.
Excellent. Insurance policies. There are insurance policies that can protect you from embezzlement?
Correct, yes. It's definitely an important part of an insurance policy. Your package or business owner's policy usually has a crime section, which will cover you for employee theft, and also there's a section called employee dishonesty, which is specific for embezzlement from your employees or some type of fraud that's going on.
I'm sure you say this a lot to your clients, but what we've seen, sorry to cut in, but what we've seen is we have some clients that think if they have that insurance policy, that takes the onus off of them, and they don't have to put in internal controls because they have insurance to cover it. So we keep telling them, read your insurance policy.
Right.
I'm certain it says you have to do something.
They do have it. The main thing is how much coverage you have. I know in a couple of instances, usually there's a give me coverage on a business owner's policy of like $25,000 to $50,000. But I've heard average claim on some kind of employee theft is somewhere around $289,000. So the $25,000 or $50,000 is not going to go that far. So you definitely want to talk to an agent, get some advice on where potentially the amount that could be embezzled, and maybe raise your limits on your policy, which you can do.
Yeah, and we're seeing, if you take a look at the research, those numbers are creeping up. The amount of money that people are embezzling is going up and up and up, as well as the number of people embezzling is going up and up and up. So it's really coming from all sides. Make sure that you are protecting yourself. So you can have protections with insurance, but what do you do legally once you're pretty darn sure you've got a problem?
Well, legally, I think, I agree that a lot of employers try to handle it internally and quietly by themselves, maybe to get the employee just to pay it back. Great, they should definitely pay it back, of course. But I think, as we've heard, that doesn't always happen. A lot of employees don't have the funds to pay it back. And when you only handle it internally, you can yourself get in trouble as a business owner. There are things that you need to do. First of all, I would recommend seriously considering bringing it to the attention of law enforcement, because that can act as a deterrent for your other employees. If the other employees see that you're handling this by just making the other, the offending employee pay it back, they're thinking, well, then I might try it and I might not get caught, and what's the worst that can happen? I have to pay it back. I'm not going to get prosecuted. If they see that they're going to get prosecuted, then that's going to deter them a little bit more. So that's more of a deterrent for more behavior. What you also need to remember is that you can't go to your employee and say, you have to pay me back right now or I'll prosecute. You're going to get yourself in trouble with extortion, because you can't really threaten criminal prosecution against somebody in exchange for money. You're getting yourself potentially in trouble there. So you really do want to go ahead and explore, at least making the police report, and then doing an internal and maybe an external audit with an accountant to make sure that you have all of the information that you need. You don't know how widespread it is when you discover it, okay? And then when you do get to the point of making the employee pay it back, I think it's important to note here that a lot of employers don't realize that they cannot self-garnish, okay, wages from an employee's check. You cannot force an employee involuntarily to give you their wages out of their check to repay you. They have to have voluntarily assigned those wages over. You can't go below the minimum wage. You have to do it every time. And you want to make sure that I'm sure you're very upset as a business owner. You want to make sure that you're not going to get yourself in trouble, the way you handle it. So definitely call your attorney, call an accountant, call another trusted advisor. Of course, make your insurance claim. I imagine there's a statute of limitations on how soon you have to report your claims.
Correct.
But there's a lot that you need to do, and I think it's important not to keep it too quiet inside your company, to make sure that you're handling it in a way that discourages it from now on.
So there has to be some window of time when you suspect it and you're pretty sure. When can, I mean, this is a lot of great information. I didn't know that, I didn't know any of that. But there's a time when you suspect, and then there's a time when you're pretty sure. Can you legally, lawfully terminate somebody that you suspect of embezzlement?
Well, assuming that you're an at-will employer, you can lawfully terminate anybody for any reason or no reason at all, as long as it's not discriminatory, correct? So as long as there's no pretense for the firing that has anything to do with race, age, gender, all of that. You can. If you just simply don't trust the person and they're working for you and you can't put your finger on it, you need to ask why you don't trust them, right? But I think between the point of view not knowing for sure, if you feel like they're a good employee otherwise, I think an internal audit or an external audit or both is maybe a good idea. I would recommend actually unannounced, unscheduled, random internal audits, because if they know that they could get potentially audited at any time and they can't plan for those things, maybe that will be enough to discourage it.
I completely
Audits.
agree. Yeah,
Yeah.
we work with a lot of companies on the internal side, so not a full-fledged traditional audit, but more of an agreed-upon procedures or vulnerability assessment, so we can go in periodically throughout the year and do testing, or we can at least help business owners say, these are your vulnerable areas. You need to keep a close eye on these areas, because a lot of small businesses don't have 10 people that they can segregate all of these things to, right? So they don't have the resources to do that, but we can at least help them know what risk factors they've got and where to look, so how they can kind of mitigate those vulnerabilities.
And another thing, it's easy when you're a business owner. I'm a business owner. You have people that you've hired that you're trusting, and they may even be close friends or family members. You feel guilty conducting an audit,
Right.
because you don't want to blame them for anything. Blame it on us. Say, you know what, my lawyer and my accountant are making me do this. My insurance agency is, I'm sorry, we have to do this. My insurance company is making me do this to keep compliant. Blame it on us. I'm fine with that. But you need to not feel guilty and feel bad for doing this. This is your business. You need to protect it. And if there are people that might be taking advantage of that trust, you need to catch them and nip it. I mean, $289,000 is incredible. It's incredible.
I mean, if you even think about, a lot of business owners will say, I saw this talk. So they see this show and they see that the Association of Certified Fraud Examiners estimates 5% of gross revenue for every small business a year is lost due to fraud. So if you're a business owner watching a show, I mean, that's a trigger enough to say, I want to look, I want to say something, even if you do work with a lot of friends and family members.
Right. Blame it on me. Blame it on your lawyer. We're fine with that.
Yeah, I think as the owner, you should embrace the idea that we don't want to put any employee in a position where we would even have to ask. So you don't get to have a credit
Right.
card. We're not going to have petty cash laying around. Expense reports are signed. I sign all my checks. All of those kinds of things are because we don't want to put you at risk for ever even having to ask that question.
Correct.
Okay, so
Absolutely.
you identify somebody's embezzling, you terminate them. When do you contact the insurance company? Is that the next thing? Is it first? Is it where does that fall in line of this is how I deal with this?
I would say once you finally have identified it, you got about 30 days to put in a claim.
That's fast.
But as soon as you know and have it on paper and can prove it, you want to contact your agent, put in a claim, get it going.
So what are the most common kinds of embezzlement that you see that is claimed? Is it pretty pervasive, like 80% is blah? What does that mean? And what kind of proof do you need to come to an insurance agent and say, this is what I'm pretty sure is happening?
Well, I think first, obviously, once you talk to the outside CPA firm and have found that you have the evidence, you have it on paper, you've seen the transactions, the withdrawals, that's what you need to show to the claim adjuster to recoup some of that loss. Mm-hmm. Obviously, it's probably going to get into the court system too, and you're probably the insurance company is going to mitigate and subrogate really and recollect it from that employee.
That's one thing that we don't always see that the employees or the employers rather understand is once they do that, they're probably going to have to go through the court system and really file it, because sometimes they think they have the insurance policy and you'll just pay. well, that's not really the case, because again, like you just said, you want to get the money back too. So
Right,
absolutely.
So does the employer make a claim and then also have to go after the money, or does the insurance company?
No, the
go
insurance company is going to do it at that point.
So it's like no-fault car.
Similar, yes.
You guys do that. Okay, that's good to know. All right, so what other kinds, so what are the most, I wanted to get to what are the most common things you see?
I would say most common is probably with the accountants. I mean, they're the ones handling the money. They're the ones easily accessible to it. Probably, I would say in your more cash businesses, you're probably going to have just your cashier, someone slipping 20s here and there. I would think those are the two most common.
Yeah, we definitely see accounting is the biggest one. All accounts aren't bad. I just want to make sure I put that out there.
Right, right.
We certainly usually have the most access. But even outside of that, the expense reimbursement schemes, which is, any employee within your organization submits expense reimbursements. And while they might start out at small dollar amounts, they really, really grow. And it's a relatively easy way for an employee to kind of pad things. I do a lot of coaching to our clients on what you really need to be looking at with expense reimbursements, because it's one of those standard things that they don't look at the details, and an employee can really get a little extra compensation through that. Unfortunately, I mean, it's not funny. I smile about it,
not.
but
I'm just saying, I'm smiling because I'm guilty of that myself. I actually had a former employee who was padding their mileage. And I reimburse for mileage, and man, if they're driving a lot and you're not checking where they're going and what they're asking for the mileage reimbursement, sometimes it's a mistake.
right.
Sometimes they're asking for mileage driving from their home to work or something like that. But if you're not looking for that, you can end up paying out hundreds of extra dollars. And I've been caught doing that. It's easy to do. Yeah, that's a great one.
Caught not finding it, not caught doing it.
Right,
You have caught people.
Just to clarify.
You're the owner. You're just
I'm
really
the
kind
owner.
of
Right, yeah.
moving money over there now.
Yeah.
Yep.
So you contact the accountant. I did a bit of research on this, and one of the things that surprised me about this was how expensive a forensic audit can be if it really is systemic in the business. Can you talk about the cost, the real cost? Not just the money is gone now, but there's other costs.
The forensic costs are certainly going to be expensive. We absolutely would rather come in and help you put in controls. Any accountant would, or attorney, put in the controls in the beginning so you don't have to deal with all those costs. But outside of that, there's forensic costs, there's attorney costs, there's PR costs, there's transition costs, because you have to retrain. You have to not only train that position that you just lost, but you have to rebuild the morale of your whole entire team, because you've lost it. I mean, once everybody knows there was that embezzlement and the ownership, the leadership wasn't fiscally responsible, or that tone from the top was lost, it's way more than just the dollars. That's a great point that they took.
Yeah, just we talk a lot about from the owner perspective. It's very lonely at the top. It's very difficult. There's really nobody to talk to. In many cases, something like this can really take the wind out of you. Just emotionally, I think there's a toll there, and probably emotionally around the office. Some people will probably think, no, that's not true. That didn't happen. I know that person. I love that person. There's a certain personality, I think, that goes along with embezzlement. People who do it are good at it. And I think what I would say is, rather than pay that money and hope that they pay you back and leave them on staff, know what you know, get that person out of there, even if it's your mother, sister, brother, daughter, son. Get them out of that business, because now you know what you know. And so emotionally, I think that's just a really big story. So there's cash fraud and accounting fraud, but there's other protections, right, in insurance that we can.
There is. I was going to bring that up.
Yeah.
If you have a retirement plan or 401k, something like that, that is not going to be covered by the crime, the employee dishonesty coverage on your business owner's policy. For that coverage, you need what's called an ERISA bond. And that is to cover specifically for the retirement fund and anyone dealing with the transactions of that fund who by chance might skim a little off it, that's where you're going to find the coverage. And usually what you have to hold is, it's usually 10% of what the fund amount is in the property in there.
Do you see a lot of cyber crime or cyber insurance that you're getting more requests for policies?
That's another area where specifically if you have fraud or ransomware that's taken place at your business, that's where you want to have a cyber liability policy with data breach coverage. That's where you're going to find coverage for that specific part. So it's those are pretty much the three most important things. It's having the cyber liability, data breach, have your ERISA for your retirement plan, and then on your business owner's policy is where you want the crime and employee dishonesty coverage.
Thank you so much. I think that it's a tough one because it's not taken very seriously, and people rarely pay big penalties, but it's so pervasive. So having you here has been really important information. Thanks.
Thank you.
So we're talking about embezzlement today, and I'm wondering, is there things you can do from an IT perspective to limit access?
Yeah, so the thing that, when things are electronic, they're in the cloud, they're on a server, it's not really apparent who has access to it. If it's a file cabinet that's locked and there's files in it, it's pretty clear who's got the key. When things are online, it's not so clear. And so employers need to be very cognizant of that and put the controls in place and have auditing, general, occasional looking at stuff to see who has access to what. And what we want is something called least privilege. It's the least privilege that an employee needs to get their job done. So we don't want to give them access to stuff that they don't need, only give them access to the things that they need to get their job done. And that's the control that we really need in order to keep people from doing things that they shouldn't be doing.
Exactly. So if somebody does do something, are there some alerts that can be put in place to help us understand?
Exactly. So just like with the credit card, you have spending limits, or you have card not present transaction alerts from your credit card company. The same type of controls can be put in place in a server environment or in a cloud environment where someone can get an alert if an employee deletes files or accesses files. The things that we would want to control, the things that we want to pay attention to, we need to figure those out and set up the alerts to make that happen.
I've also seen an alert for myself about somebody tried to log into this account or from a different device.
Right, those are good examples of those types of alerts that we need to have in place in order to control the environment.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Focus on Tech, brought to you by Providence, making technology easier.
Kenneth Kelly, thank you for being here on embezzlement. What are some of the warning signs a bank looks for?
The bank will typically look for signs such as the authenticity of the signature. We would also look at the actual activity that's happening within that account.
Great. From an owner's perspective, are there some safeguards that we can put in place?
First of all, you need to know it can happen to you. Secondly, run all of your receipts through an actual checking account. Third, I would say you need to separate the duties associated with payables and receivables. Also, I would say require mandatory vacation periods for your employees. Review the statements and, most importantly, audit the books.
So requiring things to go through your checking account, are you talking about petty cash?
Yes, I would try to minimize petty cash. It's just an opportunity for loss activity there.
Right. And then separating, you're talking about separating the people paying the bills versus?
Yes, separating the power of those who are in charge of paying the bills and actually writing the bills. So when you do that, you create an opportunity for two people to be involved, and they have to collude to embezzle. And so sometimes in a small company, we have a lot of individuals who will actually take that responsibility on themselves, and it gives them a lot of control in managing the funds of that business. And so we need to know that 55% of all embezzlement happens within companies with employees of less than 100.
So it's harder to collude, I would imagine.
That's correct.
I am just fascinated by this idea of vacation. Vacation. Tell me more about that.
Well, we find that people who become obsessed with control have the ability to take too much control. And so if you have an individual in your company who wants to take the financials away with them on vacation and manage them afar, that's probably a sign that you may have some suspicious activity happening.
That's excellent. You have been so helpful. I appreciate you being here.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Focus on Banking, brought to you by Michigan Bankers Association.
We have covered a lot of ground as it relates to embezzlement, some really good stuff. But what are some of the more obscure things that you might not think about when it comes to embezzlement?
So borrowing someone else's personal information is embezzlement. Okay, so even the identity theft you can get into. For example, a receptionist or someone who routinely accesses the mail when it's coming in, using credit card offers, and using your information, your personal information as the business owner or the company information to get a credit card and start using it and running up debt for the company or for you personally, that's embezzlement. And it's more common than we think. It's something that really needs to be looked for. And I think that one way to at least not necessarily always prevent it, but to catch it is regular audits of your credit information. So credit reporting agencies, somebody who might, maybe your accountant or your accounting company coming in and doing biannual external audits of all of your finances to make sure that everything's staying in order.
So this could be as simple as having a conversation with your bookkeeper,
Right.
Looking at all of your credit card statements as they come in, because a lot of this stuff is automated now, and sorting your own mail.
Right, but those are all really time consuming, and as business owners we don't always want to do those things. So I think it's important to at least do them occasionally to make sure that our staff and our employees know that we're looking. And so that can be random. It doesn't have to be every week or every month, but it can be random enough to let them know that we're auditing that behavior and that they're working for us and that they don't have any privacy and at the workplace for doing that kind of thing, and that they're being monitored.
That's a great reminder.
Sure.
And it's it's very pervasive.
is.
Really good stuff. Thanks.
Focus on Law, brought to you by Pollicella and Associates, PLLC.
My hope is that today's show will prompt you to look a little deeper into your books, review your checks and balances, and ask about good insurance coverage so you'll have a little more protection.